Apple revolutionized the laptop market in 2020 with M1, the first of a family of chips they had created themselves. I've been recommending M1 MacBook Airs for some time now on this channel. Their performance is incredible given the low power draw, and you can get battery life unlike anything we ever saw on an Intel Mac. These are long-lasting machines. Even if you buy one now, you'll easily push another 5 years out of it, and I reckon might be still using it into the 2030s with a bit of luck. This does beg an important question though. You can't upgrade M1 Macs after purchase, and are stuck with whichever specs you buy, so which configuration should you go for? GPU options, as well as RAM and storage sizes, can all be tweaked to your liking. Let's look at the GPUs first, because it's a bit of a weird story. Apple's M1 chip isn't the same as a regular CPU. It's an SoC, or system on a chip. This means that most of the integral parts of the computer are stored in this one small area, hardly bigger than a desktop CPU. The CPU is there, and the RAM is right next to it. The GPU is on board as well. You basically have the choice of a 7 or 8 core GPU at purchase. The base model, of course, had the 7 cores, with the upgraded option having 8. That is kind of strange because one extra GPU core is not a significant upgrade, so why do they offer it? This is almost certainly the reason. Apple gets its chips made by a company called TSMC. They're a huge player in the chip manufacturing market, but like virtually all chip manufacturers, they cannot ensure perfect conditions to make these tiny things in every time. We're talking about making precision cuts down to the nanometer. That's 1,000 times smaller than an average raindrop. Anyway, when there are significant imperfections in a chip or batch of chips, they come out inferior. They might still be used, but with fewer cores working, for example. This is called binning. While Apple might be aiming for 8 working GPU cores in their M1 chips, they can use the lower bin chips that will only work with, say, 7 cores as a lower end model. All the other 8-core GPUs go into the MacBook Pros, Mac Minis, and higher spec MacBook Airs. The difference for us between the 7 and 8-core GPUs is about 11% at most. That's only in GPU-intensive tasks though, so the bottom line is, if you're a 3D graphic designer or want to play games a lot, you should probably consider getting the 8-core GPU. For everyone else though, the 7-core is absolutely fine. Right, storage is a rather simpler affair. You can get M1 MacBook Airs with SSDs from 256GB to 2TB in size. But listen, video editing, photo editing, audio production, playing video games, backing up photos. If you plan on doing any of those things, do not even consider buying the 256GB option. It won't be enough after a year or so, and you'll be forever toying with the idea of buying a new Mac or a big external drive. Save yourself the faff and the extra money. That's my advice. The SSD configured with your M1 Air is soldered to the logic board. You won't get a chance to upgrade. 256GB is what a lot of phones come with nowadays, and frankly, you deserve better. In the used market, it'll be about $60 to $100 in price difference to get the 512GB model, but I'd wager it's absolutely worth it. I guess unless you're buying it purely for browsing the internet or working with text documents. On the opposite end of the spectrum, 2TB is the largest configuration. 2TB MacBook Airs are quite difficult to find used. They're almost prohibitively expensive too, so it's likely you'll pay $1,000 or more for one of those. If you're after something with that much storage, you can do a lot better than buy the 2TB MacBook Air. Firstly, external storage is a very good idea if you don't need constant access to everything on your drive. You can get 2TB of external SSD storage for about $150. Photo and video backups can be periodically transferred to your external drive, and if you need it a lot, you can just take it places with you and plug it in on the go. If you really need on-device storage though, it's probably worth considering a slightly higher-end Mac. Your needs will more than likely benefit from twice the RAM and storage a base model M1 Pro MacBook Pro will give you. Anyway, bit off topic really. The main point here is that storage is not upgradable. Choose wisely. 512GB is the most fitting option for almost everyone, I think, but I can understand if you might need a bit more or a bit less. Let's talk about RAM options now. 8GB of RAM is the base configuration on M1 MacBook Airs. That's better than some Chromebooks and older Windows laptops, but for a machine that cost $1,000 when new, you really would expect better. It originally cost $200 more to get 16GB instead, but these days the difference between 8 and 16GB models is about $80 used. Here's the thing though, M1 chips are really good at getting a lot from very little. They draw very little power, yet can compete with Intel chips of the time that used over twice the watts. The same is true for memory. The whole of macOS is very RAM efficient, with less going on during idle time than would be if you used Windows. This means that the 8GB base model MacBook Airs are able to use almost all of their RAM on completing the task you're handling in the foreground, be it editing, gaming, or whatever. M1 has proved time and time again that the majority of users actually don't need over 8GB of RAM, even though it might speed up things a little bit. The other reason 8GB is often very workable is swap memory. Swap memory is a portion of your computer's storage that is used as short-term memory, kind of like an extension of your RAM. Swap memory is particularly impressive on modern Macs because of how fast the SSDs are. They use PCIe-based drives that move data around really fast. Again, complex explanation here for something you really don't need to worry about. Memory swapping was at the center of some controversy when the M1 MacBooks dropped in 2020 and 2021. People were concerned that the process would kill their SSDs faster because of how much data was being written and read. I don't think it's a cause for concern though. Data swapping has been done by most OSs since before we entered the 2000s. We're also nearing 5 years of M1 MacBooks with no great influx of them appearing with dead SSDs. If anything, the issue here is that neither the RAM or ROM is replaceable if it gives out. There's nothing we can do about that right now. I'm sorry to go into such extensive detail about every part I talk about today. I do think there's good reason for me to do so though. All across the internet, you're going to find people saying get the 16GB variant if you want to use more than one app at once, and if you do video editing, you can't work with 8GB of RAM. These messages are often spread by people who haven't actually looked into how M1 architecture works. That might be good advice for building a Windows PC, or even for buyers of older Intel Macs. M1 through M4 have changed the game though. As a video editor, I'm here to tell you that it is possible to edit just fine with 8GB of RAM on this MacBook Air. I sometimes do so with Photoshop open in the background too. 16GB of RAM will get you where you're going faster during rendering and when applying some effects, especially if your edits are in 4K. You also might want to consider a 16GB machine if you plan on using it for upwards of 5 years from now. Apps and games these days do require more and more RAM every year, and although I hesitate to use the term future-proofing, you will slow the aging of your Mac somewhat by getting one with the most RAM possible. So overall, there's a very good chance you'll be fine with a base model Mac. Don't worry yourself too much about 7 versus 8 GPU cores, or about 8 versus 16GB of RAM. The main warning to take from this video is that if you don't buy your M1 MacBook Air with enough storage from the get-go, you will be very disappointed very quickly. Earlier this year, I bought a 256GB model to edit all my content on. It was all my budget could really stretch to, but I wish I'd saved to get a 512GB model at very least. I see a lot of the storage almost full warning, and it really slows down my content creation process. Don't make the same mistake I did. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you especially to my supporters on Patreon. Consider joining the What's on Your Screen Discord server if you're into technology, old or new, and I'll see you next week.